The party was supposed to be a celebration. Thompson and Associates had just closed the biggest merger in the firm's history, and every partner, associate, and their significant others had been invited to the sprawling estate of senior partner Richard Thompson. The mansion sat on 5 acres of manicured lawns, complete with a pool house, tennis courts, and enough space that 200 guests could mingle without feeling crowded. I adjusted my tie in the reflection of the champagne fountain, watching my wife laugh with a group of people I didn't recognize. She looked stunning tonight, midnight blue dress that hugged her curves perfectly, her dark hair cascading over her shoulders. We'd been married for 8 years, together for 10, and there were moments like this when I still couldn't believe she'd chosen me. "Your wife is the life of the party, as usual," said James, one of my colleagues, clapping me on the shoulder. "You're a lucky man." I smiled, nodding. "Don't I know it?" But something felt off. It had felt off for months now, though I couldn't quite put my finger on it. The late nights at the gym that stretched later and later. The phone she now kept face down on every surface. The way she'd become almost too attentive, too affectionate, as if overcompensating for something. I pushed the thoughts away. Not tonight. Tonight was about celebration, about success, about enjoying the fruits of all those 70-hour work weeks. "I'm going to grab another drink," I told James, making my way toward one of the many bars scattered throughout the property. The bartender, a young man in a crisp vest, mixed my whiskey sour with practiced efficiency. As I waited, I scanned the crowd for my wife again. She'd moved from the group near the fountain to the edge of the pool area, her champagne glass tilted at an angle that suggested it wasn't her first. Or her second. I frowned. She'd been drinking more lately too. Another thing on the list of changes I'd been cataloguing subconsciously, not wanting to confront the pattern they might form. "Here you go, sir," the bartender said, sliding my drink across the marble counter. I thanked him and began weaving through the crowd. The party had that comfortable hum of successful people enjoying themselves, laughter, the clink of glasses, the smooth jazz quartet playing near the terrace. I stopped to chat with a few people, accepted congratulations on the merger, made small talk about vacation plans and the unseasonably warm weather. When I looked for my wife again, she was gone. Not concerning yet. It was a big property, lots of rooms. She was probably in the bathroom or checking out the art collection Thompson was always bragging about. I continued my circuit of the party, stopping to discuss golf handicaps with one of the VPs, nodding sympathetically as someone's spouse complained about their contractor. 20 minutes passed. Then 30. I checked the main house, the powder rooms, the sitting areas, even the library where a few people had gathered for cigars and quieter conversation. No sign of her. Back outside, I walked the perimeter of the pool area, checked the tennis courts where a few drunk associates were attempting a game in the dark. Nothing. 45 minutes now. I texted her, "Where are you?" The message showed as delivered but not read. I tried calling. Straight to voicemail. A cold feeling began to settle in my stomach, that same instinct that had made me a successful attorney, the ability to sense when something wasn't right, when the facts didn't add up. I found James again. "Have you seen my wife?" He shook his head. "Not in a while." Checked the house. Everywhere I can think of. He must have caught something in my expression because his smile faded. "I'm sure she's fine. Probably just powder room gossip. You know how these things go." I nodded, but the cold feeling intensified. I'd been ignoring my instincts for months, explaining away every strange behavior, every inconsistency. But standing there, in the middle of a celebration that suddenly felt hollow, I realized I was done ignoring what my gut had been screaming at me. Something was very wrong, and I was going to find out exactly what. I stood on the terrace, my untouched whiskey sour sweating condensation onto my palm, and forced myself to think like the attorney I was. Evidence. Facts. Logic. Emotion clouded judgment, and right now I needed clarity more than anything else. An hour and 15 minutes. My wife had been gone for over an hour at a party where we knew dozens of people, where she should have been networking, laughing, celebrating. The kind of party you didn't just disappear from. Unless you wanted to. I pulled out my phone and opened our shared location app. We'd set it up years ago, back when it seemed like a cute couple thing, a way to coordinate pickups and know when the other was heading home. I'd honestly forgotten about it until now. The app loaded, and there she was, a little blue dot on the map, still on the property. I zoomed in, trying to make sense of the satellite view. The dot placed her somewhere beyond the main house and pool area, past the formal gardens, in the section of the estate I hadn't explored yet. Near the guest cottage. The one Thompson had mentioned during the tour earlier in the evening, the one he'd had renovated for visiting clients and family. My heart hammered against my ribs. There could be innocent explanations. She could be getting fresh air, taking a phone call away from the noise, escaping the crowd for a moment of peace. But she wasn't answering my texts or calls. I made my decision quickly. Rather than stumbling around in the dark, possibly alerting her to my search, I needed to be smart about this. I found one of the event coordinators, an efficient woman with a tablet who'd been managing the catering staff all evening. "Excuse me," I said, turning on the charm that had won over countless juries. "I'm so sorry to bother you, but my wife isn't feeling well, and I think she went to lie down somewhere quiet. Mr. Thompson mentioned there's a guest cottage. I want to check on her, but I'm not sure how to get there in the dark." The coordinator's face filled with concern. "Oh, of course. Poor thing. Yes, the cottage is just past the rose garden, down the stone path. There's lighting along the walkway. Is there anything I can get her? Water? Aspirin?" No, I'm sure she just needs a moment. Thank you so much." As I walked away, I caught sight of Thompson himself holding court near the pool. Something made me pause, made me watch him for a moment. He was laughing, gesturing with his champagne flute, playing the magnanimous host. But every so often, his eyes would flicker toward the back of the property, toward the gardens, toward the cottage, toward where my wife was. The cold feeling in my stomach turned to ice. I followed the stone path through the rose garden, my footsteps silent on the smooth flagstones. The party sounds faded behind me, replaced by the chirp of crickets and the gentle splash of a fountain. The cottage came into view, a charming structure of stone and timber, lights glowing warmly in the windows. I approached carefully, keeping to the shadows. Through the window, I could see into what appeared to be a sitting room. Tasteful furniture, a fireplace, artwork on the walls. And my wife, sitting on a leather sofa, her head tilted back in laughter. Her shoes were off, her legs tucked beneath her. The champagne glass in her hand was full again. Someone had refilled it for her. That someone sat beside her, close enough that their knees touched. I recognized him immediately. Derek Chen, Thompson's protégé, the golden boy of the firm who'd made junior partner in record time. He was young, 32 maybe, with the kind of easy confidence that came from never having failed at anything. As I watched, he leaned in and whispered something in her ear. She laughed again, placing her hand on his chest, not pushing away but lingering there, her fingers splayed across his shirt. I'd seen enough courtroom evidence in my career to know what I was looking at. The body language, the intimacy, the way they moved around each other like they'd done this before. This wasn't a spontaneous moment. This was comfortable. Familiar. How long? The question echoed in my mind. How long had this been going on? All those late gym nights. Was she meeting him? All those face-down phone calls. Was she texting him? How many times had I kissed her goodbye in the morning, gone to work alongside this man, shared strategy sessions and coffee runs, while he was sleeping with my wife? I waited, frozen in the shadows, watching. Derek's hand moved to her knee, sliding slowly upward. She didn't stop him. Instead, she set down her champagne glass and turned toward him more fully. That's when I walked away. Not because I'd seen enough, I had. Not because I couldn't bear to watch, though I couldn't. I walked away because I knew that confronting them now, in this moment, would be the worst possible move. It would be emotional, messy, reactive. And I was a lawyer. I built cases. I gathered evidence. I struck when I had the advantage. By the time I reached my car, I'd already made 3 phone calls. I didn't go home that night. Instead, I checked into a hotel downtown, one of the high-end chains where I'd stayed countless times for depositions and trials. The night clerk recognized me and made small talk about a case I'd won, but I barely heard him. My mind was already 3 moves ahead, planning, strategizing, building my case. The hotel room was anonymous and sterile, exactly what I needed. I sat on the edge of the bed, still in my suit, and made the 4th call of the night. "David? It's me. I need a favor, and I need it to stay between us." David Harrison had been my best friend since law school. He practiced family law while I'd gone into corporate, and we'd joked for years that our specialties meant we'd never be in competition. Now I was grateful for that choice. "It's midnight," he said, but his voice was alert. "What's wrong?" "I need a divorce attorney. The best you know. Someone who's absolutely ruthless." There was a pause. "Jesus. You're serious?" "Dead serious. And David? I need someone who can move fast. I want papers drawn up by Monday morning." "That's 2 days from now." "I know what day it is." Another pause, longer this time. "What happened?" I told him. Not everything. I couldn't quite bring myself to describe what I'd seen in detail, but enough. His anger on my behalf was palpable even through the phone. "I know someone," he finally said. "Kathleen Morrison. She handles high-net-worth divorces, specializes in cases with complications. She's expensive as hell but worth every penny. I'll call her first thing tomorrow, explain the situation. She'll want to meet with you immediately." "Good. And David? I need recommendations for a forensic accountant and a private investigator." "You think there's more?" "I don't know. But I'm going to find out everything before I make my move. Every detail. I'm not leaving anything to chance. I'll send you names within an hour." After I hung up, I sat in the darkness of the hotel room and let myself feel it. The betrayal, the humiliation, the rage. I'd given this woman 8 years of my life. I'd worked brutal hours to give us a comfortable life, to save for the future we'd planned together. "Children," she'd said. "Maybe next year. Always next year." Had she ever meant it? Or had I been the safe choice, the stable provider, while she looked elsewhere for excitement? My phone buzzed. A text from her, finally. "Where are you? Party's winding down." I stared at the message for a long moment, then typed back, "Got a call from a client. Emergency situation. Had to leave. Don't wait up, I'll be at the office all night. Uber home." 3 little dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. "Okay. Love you. Love you." I set the phone down without responding. The next 36 hours were a blur of calculated action. Saturday morning, I met with Kathleen Morrison in her office. She'd agreed to come in on a weekend after David explained the urgency. She was exactly what I needed: sharp, clinical, unsympathetic to cheating spouses. "I understand you want to move quickly," she said, her fingers steepled on her desk. "But I need to know why. Speed costs more and limits our options." "Because every day I pretend not to know is a day I have to lie next to someone who's been lying to me for God knows how long," I said flatly. "And because I don't want to give her time to hide assets or prepare her own case." Kathleen smiled, a predator's expression. "Fair enough. Tell me everything about your financial situation." I did. The shared accounts, the house we own jointly, my retirement accounts, her significantly smaller income from her part-time consulting work. The prenup we'd never bothered with because we'd been young and in love and sure we'd last forever. "Any children?" "No. That simplifies things." "Pets?" "No. Even better. Affairs typically don't impact asset division in this state unless marital funds were spent on the paramour, but it can influence alimony. We'll need evidence." "I'll have it." The private investigator, a former FBI agent named Russo, met me at a coffee shop that afternoon. He listened to my story with the detached interest of someone who'd heard it all before. "Social media first," he said, pulling out a tablet. "You'd be amazed what people think is private. What's your wife's full name?" I watched as he navigated through databases I didn't know existed. Public records, social media cross-references, professional networks. Within an hour, he'd found 3 photos of my wife and Derek together at various events over the past 6 months. Nothing obviously romantic, but there they were, again and again, in the background of other people's pictures. "I'll need a few days for the full workup," Rousseau said. "Phone records, credit card statements. If you can get me authorized access, that speeds things up considerably." I thought about the shared credit card, the one I was the primary holder on. "I can get you what you need." Sunday morning, I told my wife I had to go back to the office. More emergency client work. She barely looked up from her phone. "Sure, honey," she said absently. "I'm meeting Claire for brunch anyway." Claire. Her best friend. I wondered if Claire knew. I wondered how many people knew, how many times I'd been the fool walking into rooms where people stopped talking, where knowing glances were exchanged behind my back. Instead of the office, I went to a storage facility and rented a unit. Then I went home, to what would soon be her home alone, and methodically began packing my personal items. Important documents, sentimental photos of my family, my grandfather's watch, my law school diploma. Things that mattered to me, things I wanted to ensure stayed mine. I worked carefully, taking only what was unquestionably mine, leaving no obvious gaps that would alert her before I was ready. By Sunday evening, I had everything in place. Kathleen had the divorce papers ready for Monday morning. Rousseau had preliminary findings confirming what I'd witnessed: numerous meetings, suspicious credit card charges at hotels in the city. The moving company I'd hired was scheduled for Monday at dawn. I went back to the hotel and slept better than I had in months. Monday morning arrived with the kind of crystalline clarity that made everything feel surreal and hyperreal at the same time. I woke at 5, showered, dressed in one of my best suits, armor for what was coming, and met the moving truck at a 24-hour diner 3 blocks from my house. Our house. Soon to be just her house, at least until the courts decided otherwise. The crew chief, a weathered man named Tommy who'd seen his share of domestic situations, went over the plan with me. "We've done this before," he assured me. "Quick and professional. We'll have you out in 90 minutes, tops." I'd given them a detailed list of what to take: my clothes, my home office furniture and equipment, my books, the few pieces of furniture I'd brought into the marriage. Nothing contentious, nothing that would be contested in court. I was being fair, scrupulously fair, because I wanted no ammunition for her to use against me later. At 6:15, we pulled up to the house. Her car was in the driveway. She'd be asleep for at least another hour on a Monday morning. She'd never been a morning person. I unlocked the door as quietly as possible, and the movers went to work with practiced efficiency. They'd wrapped everything in quilted blankets, their movements silent and swift. I stood in my home office, my former home office, and felt nothing. The numbness that had settled over me since Saturday night hadn't lifted. Maybe that was a mercy. While the movers worked, I placed the divorce papers on the kitchen counter, weighted down by her favorite coffee mug so she'd see them immediately when she came downstairs. The papers were thorough. Kathleen had outdone herself on such short notice. Petition for dissolution of marriage, citing irreconcilable differences. Fair division of assets as required by state law. No request for alimony from either party. Clean, clinical, final. Attached to the papers was a single photograph, printed in color on photo paper. I'd agonized over including it, wondering if it was petty, if it made me look bitter. But in the end, I decided she deserved to know that I knew, that I'd seen, that this wasn't me giving up on a marriage but me refusing to be complicit in my own humiliation any longer. The photograph was from the guest cottage, taken from outside through the window. Her and Derek on the sofa, his hand on her leg, her head thrown back in laughter. Their intimacy was unmistakable. Underneath, I'd written in my own hand, "I know." That was all. No accusations, no recriminations, no emotional outpouring. Just those 2 words. By 7:30, the truck was loaded. I walked through the house one final time, this place where I'd imagined growing old, where we'd hosted dinner parties and celebrated anniversaries, where I'd carried her across the threshold 8 years ago with such hope and joy. In the bedroom, I could hear her soft breathing, still deep in sleep. I stood in the doorway for a moment, looking at the shape of her under the covers. Part of me, the part that had loved her for 10 years, wanted to wake her up, to give her a chance to explain, to beg for forgiveness, to promise it would never happen again. But I knew better. I'd seen too many cases, heard too many stories. Cheating was rarely a one-time mistake. It was a pattern, a choice made over and over again. And even if she begged, even if she cried and swore she'd change, I knew I'd never be able to trust her again. Every late night, every unexplained absence, every face-down phone would resurrect this feeling, this hollow, gutted sensation of having been made a fool. I deserved better than a life sentence of suspicion and doubt. I pulled the door closed without a sound and walked out of the house for the last time. At 8, I was in Kathleen's office, signing paperwork. The process server will deliver a copy to her at noon, she explained. Protocol requires it, even though she'll already have the papers you left. By this afternoon, she'll likely try to contact you. I strongly advise you not to answer. Let her reach out to her own attorney, and we'll handle everything through proper channels. What if she comes to my new place? Where are you staying? Extended stay hotel for now. I'll look for an apartment this week. Perfect. If she shows up, don't let her in. Don't engage. Call the police if she refuses to leave. I know this sounds harsh, but you need to protect yourself legally. Any communication between you two at this point can be used in court. What about work? I'd been dreading this question. Derek and I worked at the same firm. While we weren't on the same team, we'd inevitably cross paths. That's trickier. You can't dictate who your wife has relationships with, even at your workplace, and confronting him could potentially affect your position. However, if there was any misuse of firm resources, company time, expense accounts, that sort of thing, that's a matter for HR and the partners. I thought about this. I'll need to discuss it with senior management. Discreetly. Do you have an HR department you trust? I trust our managing partner. He's old school, big on ethics and firm reputation. Good. Document everything before that conversation. Dates, times, any evidence you have. Make it about the firm's exposure, not your personal situation. By 9, I was at the office. I'd beaten most of my colleagues, deliberately arriving early to avoid questions about why I looked like I'd aged 5 years over the weekend. In my office, I closed the door and began preparing my documentation. At 9:30, my phone started ringing. Her name lit up the screen. I let it go to voicemail. Immediately, a text. What the hell is this? Another call. Another text. You can't just leave divorce papers and disappear. We need to talk. Then, please call me. This is insane. I turned my phone face down on my desk and got to work. At 10, I had a meeting scheduled with Gerald Thompson, the managing partner. Before I went, I received an email from Russo, the investigator. Initial report attached. More to come, but thought you'd want to see this ASAP. I opened the attachment. Phone records showing hundreds of texts between my wife and Derek over the past 6 months. Credit card statements showing hotel charges, expensive dinners. A timeline of their encounters that made my stomach turn. 6 months. At minimum. Possibly longer. I saved the file, composed myself, and went to Thompson's office. Gerald Thompson had been practicing law since before I was born, a silver-haired titan of the legal community whose handshake could seal a deal and whose disapproval could end a career. He looked up from his computer as I entered, his reading glasses perched on his nose, and gestured to the chair across from his massive oak desk. "You look terrible," he said bluntly. "What's going on?" I'd rehearsed this conversation in my head a dozen times, trying to strike the right balance between professional and personal, between protecting myself and not appearing vindictive. In the end, I decided on directness. "I'm filing for divorce," I said. "My wife has been having an affair with someone at this firm. I wanted you to hear it from me before it becomes office gossip." Thompson's expression didn't change, but something flickered in his eyes. "I see. I'm sorry to hear that. Who?" "Derek Chen." Now Thompson's face did change. He removed his glasses slowly, set them on the desk, and leaned back in his chair. "You're certain?" "I have photographic evidence, phone records, credit card statements showing hotel visits. Unless they've been conducting an intensive business partnership I'm unaware of, Yes, I'm certain. Does Derek know you know? Not yet. My wife found out this morning. I imagine she's contacted him by now. Thompson was quiet for a long moment, his fingers steepled under his chin. You understand this puts me in a difficult position. Derek is a partner in this firm. I can't terminate him based on his personal relationships. I'm not asking you to. But I thought you should know that this affair has been conducted, at least partially, on firm time and possibly using firm resources. My investigator is still compiling a full report, but there are hotel charges during business hours, expense account dinners that appear to have been for 2 people rather than client meetings. If you want to verify that yourself before taking any action, I understand. And what do you want from this conversation? I want you to know so you're not blindsided. And professionally, I need assurance that this won't affect my position at the firm. I've given 14 years to this place. I'm not going to let her affair cost me my career too. Thompson nodded slowly. That's fair. And you have my word, this won't impact your standing here. As for Derek. He paused, choosing his words carefully. I'll need to review the situation. If firm resources were misused, that's a separate issue from his personal conduct. But either way, I appreciate you bringing this to me directly rather than letting it become a spectacle. I'm trying to handle this with as much dignity as possible. You're doing better than most would in your situation. Thompson stood, extending his hand. Take whatever time you need this week. And if you need a recommendation for a good divorce attorney, I know several. I'm already represented, but thank you. As I left his office, I felt a small measure of relief. At least my professional life was secure, even as my personal life imploded. Back at my desk, my phone showed 17 missed calls and over 30 text messages. I scrolled through them without reading most. Anger, denial, pleading, more anger. A few from numbers I didn't recognize, probably her friends, maybe her family. One message stood out, though. From Derek, we need to talk. This doesn't have to be messy. I almost laughed at the audacity. He'd been sleeping with my wife for at least 6 months, and he thought we could have a civilized conversation about it? That we could somehow negotiate this like a business deal? Instead of responding, I forwarded the message to Kathleen with a note, for the file. Around 1 in the afternoon, there was a knock on my office door. James, my colleague from the party, stuck his head in. Hey, got a minute? Sure. He closed the door behind him and sat down, looking uncomfortable. Look, I don't know what's going on, and you don't have to tell me if you don't want to. But word's spreading that you and your wife are splitting up, and Derek just got called into Thompson's office looking like he'd seen a ghost. So I'm guessing it's all connected, and I just wanted you to know, if you need anything, I'm here. Okay. The unexpected kindness almost broke through my numbness. Thanks, James. I appreciate that. For what it's worth, a lot of us had suspicions. About Derek and, well, we just didn't know how to tell you, or if we should. I'm sorry. After he left, I sat alone in my office and let that sink in. People had known. People had suspected. And no one had said anything because it was awkward, because they didn't want to get involved, because it was easier to look away. I didn't blame them. I probably would have done the same thing. By 5, I was done pretending to work. I gathered my things and headed to the extended stay hotel that would be my home for the foreseeable future. The room was clean and anonymous, a blank slate. It felt appropriate. My phone rang again. Her name. This time, I answered. Finally, she breathed. We need to talk. This is crazy. You can't just. I can, I interrupted. And I did. You'll be hearing from my attorney. All communication should go through her. I deserve a chance to explain. Explain what? That I didn't see what I saw? That the photograph is fake? That 6 months of hotel visits were all coincidences? Silence. Then, quietly, how long have you known? Long enough to do this right. Long enough to protect myself. Long enough to realize that the woman I married wouldn't have done this, which means I don't know who you are anymore. It didn't mean, she was crying now. It was a mistake. I was confused, and he was there, and you were always working, and I just felt so lonely. Stop. I don't want to hear the justifications. I don't want to hear how it's somehow partially my fault for working hard to give us a good life. I don't want to hear any of it. Please. Don't do this. We can go to counseling, we can fix this. No, we can't. It's done. Sign the papers, get your own attorney, and let's end this with whatever dignity we have left. I hung up before she could respond. Over the next few days, pieces fell into place. Derek was placed on administrative leave while the firm investigated his use of company resources. Apparently, he charged several hotel stays and expensive dinners to his corporate card, claiming they were client entertainment. When no corresponding client meetings could be verified, his employment was terminated. My wife hired an attorney who tried to argue for a larger share of assets, claiming she'd sacrificed her career for our marriage. Kathleen demolished that argument with evidence of her minimal contributions to our household income and the fact that she'd spent marital funds on her affair. The divorce moved through the system with surprising speed. No children, no complicated assets beyond the house and our retirement accounts. We settled out of court. She got the house but had to buy out my equity. I kept my retirement accounts intact. We split the other assets 50-50. 8 months after that night at the party, I stood in a courtroom and listened to a judge dissolve my marriage with a few strokes of her pen. My ex-wife wasn't there. She'd waived her right to appear, probably unable to face me after everything that had come out during discovery. As I walked out of the courthouse into the bright sunshine of an autumn afternoon, I felt something I hadn't expected: relief. Not happiness. Not yet. But relief that it was over, that I could finally start rebuilding without the weight of betrayal dragging me down. My phone buzzed. A text from David: "It's done." "It's done," I typed back. "Drinks tonight to celebrate." I smiled slightly. Yeah, I could use that. 6 months later, I moved into a new apartment with floor-to-ceiling windows and a view of the city skyline. It was smaller than the house I'd shared with my ex-wife, but it was entirely mine. Every piece of furniture, every picture on the wall, every choice reflected who I was, not who we'd been together. I'd heard through the grapevine that she and Derek had lasted about 2 months after my divorce was finalized before their relationship imploded in spectacular fashion. Apparently, cheating together wasn't enough foundation to build something real on. Who would have thought? I didn't take pleasure in their failure, but I didn't grieve it either. They were part of a chapter of my life that was closed now. One evening, sitting on my balcony with a glass of wine, watching the sun set over the city, I realized something. I was okay. Better than okay, actually. The numbness had faded, replaced by something steadier. Peace, maybe. Or just the quiet satisfaction of knowing I'd handled the worst moment of my life with integrity. I hadn't lashed out, hadn't sought revenge beyond what was legally mine, hadn't made a spectacle of myself. I'd built my case, executed my plan, and walked away with my dignity and self-respect intact. And in the end, that mattered more than anything else. My phone buzzed with a notification from a dating app I'd recently joined, mostly at James's insistence that I needed to get back out there. A message from someone whose profile had made me smile, whose interests aligned with mine, who seemed genuine and kind. I opened it, read her friendly greeting, and found myself typing back. The past was the past. It was time to start building something new.